Hey y'all, my name is Alex. I'm a grad student who enjoys statistics, so I'm making these Stats 101 videos for y'all if anyone's struggling with statistics. Sometimes I feel like professors and teachers can make it a bit more complicated than it needs to be, so I'm here to hopefully try to clarify some things. Today I'm going to be talking about the different types of scales that we use in statistics. And it's definitely not exhaustive in any sense. I'm not talking about the pros and cons or how they're used in statistics, but more so to try to just expose you to the terminology and the vocabulary and give you some examples of each, so hopefully you can get more comfortable with talking about them and using them. So the four scales that I'll be talking about are nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Sometimes you hear them grouped together like nominal, ordinal, and interval ratio, but that's just because they're similar and sometimes we categorize them together. So let's start from the top. We're going to start with nominal scales. So nominal scales are used as for categorical variables. They're used to name, to label, to categorize attributes that are being measured. What's important to note is that there is no meaningful order or there's no hierarchy for this type of scale. When I think of nominal, I think names. So think of that in the sense that like you can keep a tally of names or keep track of names or ask people their names for a study, but we're not gonna order those and say that like Sally's better than the name Carolyn or Cam's better than the name Alex. It doesn't make any sense. There's no order that we can put to that. Same thing with gender, race, eye color, political party. We're not gonna try to maybe assign like a point system where like one's better than the other. We're just taking basic information and data for the study. Those are nominal categorical variables. There's no meaningful order. The next is an ordinal variable, and as you can maybe draw from the name, there is an order to these attributes, to these variables. So for example, socioeconomic status, low, medium, high. You can look at income brackets. There is an order. There is a difference between people who make a low income and a high income. Another example could be like educational level, high school degree, associates, bachelor's, master's, PhD. We can put an order to these things. Another example could be a Likert scale. If you've ever taken a survey online or something, you've seen a Likert scale. It's typically a 5 or 7 point scale, and it's typically, I think of like satisfaction. So like highly dissatisfied, neutral, satisfied, highly satisfied, or like very unhappy, neutral, happy, very happy. Likert scales are always ordinal, and I'll get back to why in a second. The next type of scale is an interval scale. With an interval scale, it's similar to an ordinal scale, but there are equal distances between each of the attributes. So, for example, any sort of time measurement, like you're looking at minutes, there's always 60 seconds between each minute. There's always 60 minutes between each hour. There's always 365 days in a year. We can look at these things and there's a numerical difference that we can easily quantify, and there's an equal distance between each minute, hour, year, whatever. Same thing with like your grade in school. There's an equal distance between first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, so on. Another example could be like SAT scores, credit scores, temperature. We put temperature in interval because there's an equal distance between 35 degrees and 36 degrees. There's an equal distance between 66 degrees and 67 degrees. There's 1 point difference between each of these. We all understand it. And kind of going back to ordinal for a second to go back to that Likert scale. Likert scales are ordinal They're not interval because, again, interval has an equal distance between each. So we don't put Likert scales as an interval scale because if you think about it, is the distance between highly dissatisfied and dissatisfied the same as between dissatisfied and feeling neutral? Take a second to sit with that. It's just hard to be like, oh, the difference between very happy and happy is the same as the difference between feeling happy and feeling neutral. We don't know. The space between these things is debated about, and it's not something you can easily quantify, because some people might be like, we should add more in between here. We should have 7 options, 14 options to really get a grasp. So Likert scales are always going to be ordinal. There's not necessarily there's not equidistant between each option necessarily. Whereas an interval scale, there is. So then we look at, like I said, temperature. Some people get confused about whether temperature would be an interval or a ratio scale. So moving on to ratio scales, what we need to know about ratio scales is that there is always a meaningful and absolute 0. A meaningful and absolute 0. 0 means that there is an absence of something. So temperature is an interesting one, right? Because, like we said, there's an equal distance between each temperature point, but 0 degrees does not mean that there's an absence of heat or temperature. There's still heat in the air, because we can go down negative, 45 degrees. So 0 degrees does not mean that there is no heat. So therefore, temperature has to be an interval scale. Whereas a ratio scale with that meaningful and absolute 0, that 0 means there's an absence of something. So for example, if you're asking someone, how many kids do you have? 0 means that they have no kids. If you look at like weight, height, length, if you have 0 weight, that thing weighs nothing. If there's no height, there's no height. So for example, like income. You ask someone, what was your income this month? 0 means it's a meaningful 0. That means they didn't make any income this month if they report 0. That 0 means an absence of something, absence of income, absence of kids, absence of friends. I don't know. But for the temperature thing, the one stipulation is that if you're looking at temperature in Kelvin, for Kelvin, 0.0 Kelvin means that there actually is no heat. So if you're looking at that type of temperature scale, then yes, that makes sense for a ratio. But so just a quick recap, nominal is for categorical variables. There's no meaningful order or hierarchy here. Ordinal scales, similar to categorical, but there is a clear ordering. But there's not necessarily equal distance between each of the things that you're ordering. So for an interval scale, we do have an equal distance between each of the attributes that we are measuring. And then for a ratio scale, there is a meaningful 0. That means that there is an absence of something. Hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions or need further examples or just want me to clarify on something, let me know, but I hope that that can be a good intro video on just starting to get a grasp of the different types of scales that there are. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments. Thanks.